Yep.
Here we are talking into the mic.
I think it's, but
We're
truly though,
talking
it's because if you have your
into
breath
the
lined
mic.
up and you have the right resonance going,
Yeah.
like your sense of your sense of pitch that you build as being a musician over time, that's still something that will
Right.
sing a tune.
I think I'm pretty good at telling.
How does one sing a tune? Depends on the day. I was trying to imagine. I looked around. I can go. Let me look around. It's not in Paradiso.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So Mike is going to be using a slide as part of the service this morning. This is the slide right here. If you can't read it, we do have printouts of it in the back, so you can go out, you can go back and grab one. Thanks. Well, looks like Mike's bringing them up.
Good morning, First Unitarian. Welcome to our multi-platform worship this morning, where we have you good folks in person, and we're also broadcasting simultaneously on Zoom and Facebook and YouTube. So what is a call to worship? We do this every single Sunday. What do we mean by that? The intention of the call to worship is to set this time apart. To set apart this precious time we have together, to set it apart in a way that is qualitatively different from the rest of our week. The hope and the purpose of the call to worship is to call attention to this time, right now, here with us, this one time during the week when we come together as a whole community to seek something higher, something more noble, something more true. This is the time we reaffirm the bonds that hold us together, the commonalities of our lives, the pains we endure, the love that we share. This hour is that one time during the week that we get that ever so rare opportunity, an authentic invitation to come in from the periphery, let down our defenses, relax our grip on the superficial, give ourselves and each other permission to go to a deeper place. For this call to worship today, I honor the call that brought you here. And I invite you to honor the call that brought you here. Whatever it was, curiosity, a longing, a place within yourself that's yearning to be filled, a need to connect to community or to God. Whatever it was, I invite you to honor that call that brought you. Whatever you're calling, the answer is here. It's here. It might be in the music or in the space itself. It might be in the quality of the light coming through the stained glass windows. It might be in the person sitting next to you, in the eyes of a child, or just in the simple fact that here and now is a gathered community of memory and hope. It will be there in the sermon. And this call to worship, I tell you, knock, and the door will be opened. Seek, and you will find. Ask, and it will be given. That is not going to be enough to last the service, I tell you. Amen. And again, welcome.
Good morning, First Unitarian. Good morning. Oh, that was weak. Good morning, First Unitarian. Good morning. Thank you. If you don't know who I am, my name is Matt Davis, and I am the Worship and Arts Coordinator for the Religious Exploration program here at First Unitarian. Yes. Well, gosh, thanks. I'm a little nervous. I haven't been up in front of people in such a long time. In real life, IRL. So today, my friends, we are talking about conflict. And the arts and theater have been a huge part of my life for so long that I wanted to share a tool from improv that I've used a lot that maybe you can use to help yourselves with conflict in your daily lives. Okay, this concept is a big one, and it's sort of the whole basis and premise of improv. It is called yes and. Say yes and. Yes and. Cool, so here's the basic idea. In a scene when you're doing improv, you are in a space, and if you are listening to your partners, whatever comes at you, you accept yes, and you move the scene forward. Because ultimately, in a scene in improv, we want a storyline, a beginning, a middle, and a good ending to it. We can use the same kind of concept with a conflict. We can accept, and I'll explain what that means in a second, and move our scene of our life forward a little bit. Now, the only way really to practice that is to play a game. So, you all are going to play an improv game, and you're like, oh my God, no. It's fine. You'll be okay. It's just in your seats. It's at your house. I see people out on Zoom and YouTube being like, oh, I can do this in my house. That's awesome. Okay, that's exactly what I want to see. So we're going to play a game called Yes and. Right? Okay, here's how the game works. First of all, I need an object. Can someone tell me an object? Apples? Apple. An apple. Okay, and I need an everyday action. Going swimming. Perfect. So that's going to be our start for everybody here. In a moment, I'm going to ask you here in the sanctuary to find a partner or a group to work with. It can be someone you came with. If it's not someone you came with, please remember our social distancing and to wear our mask over our mouth and nose. I'm a teacher. I always remember those things. Okay, so with your partner, one person is going to start with the sentence, I saw an apple going swimming. The next person has to say the words, yes, and I saw a new object doing a new thing. Now, my friends, the goal of this is not to be serious. Okay, so if you're like, I saw Barack Obama making policy changes, that is fine, that's great. Okay, but I want it to be silly. Think of an object that's silly. Yes, and something bigger. Everyone understand? Yeah. Thumbs up if you understand. Awesome. I'm going to give us a few minutes to try that. Stand up with a partner, somebody near you. Play the yes and game. Start with that. I saw an apple swimming. When I say cup, you say cake. Cup. Cake. Cup. Cake. Awesome. Okay, bring your attention back to me. You can stay standing. We're going to continue to play. I'm sure that went in weird and new places, right? Cool. I heard some weird ones. That's good. Okay, so now I'm going to change the game just a little bit. We're going to play one more round. Okay, start with that same object, an apple swimming. But one of you, at any time, can say no. And once you say no, that's all you can say. Ready? Go. Cup. Oh, you remembered the rules. Great job. Sit down. All right. Okay, think about what you noticed in that last game. When somebody said no, it stopped the conversation, right? Okay, so that's the big idea between yes and. In a scene, when we're doing improv, it's important that the scene moves on. And if you say no, even with your body or your face or even with your voice, it stops the scene. And you're like, Matt, what does this have to do with conflict? Well, okay. We can use this in our daily lives in small conflicts, but we can also use it in bigger conflicts, right? Our goal is to move the conversation forward. Yes, and. Accept and move forward. And you're like, but there's some things I cannot accept. I understand that, right? I don't mean that you have to agree or even condone what you're hearing from another person in a conflict. What I mean is you have to listen to it and try to move the conversation forward. I'll take questions at the end, Sally, hold on. Never gotten questions during my RE time. All right. So then I imagine your question might be, well, what if they stop it, right? What if their answer is no? You have done your part. The only person you're ever in control of, I tell this to children all the time, is yourself. If you are moving the conversation forward, if you're saying, yes, I know there are police officers who are good people, and I see a policing system that is making it harder and more dangerous for black people, that is a true statement. It is what you are seeing, and it's moving the conversation forward. You're agreeing and moving it forward. And that's how we can use that idea to help us in those big conflicts as well as the small ones. Sally, what was your question?
Can you also say, I hear what you're saying, and?
Yeah, yes is just a general idea, right? I hear what you're saying is sort of the same thing as yes. Except that it's got some caveats, right? It's not necessarily that I'm accepting it, I just hear what you say. I would rather that I see and I understand what you're saying, and this is what we can do to further it. Thank you guys for playing with me today. Have a good day.
For those who don't know me, I'm Sally Isaacson. And I'm usually playing to a much larger crowd in this room when I'm asking for money, but that's okay. I can handle a small, select group of close friends. I've been a member of this church for over 26 years, and the last year and a half have been the most meaningful for me because they helped me make it through COVID. If I hadn't had this church on Zoom or YouTube or whatever the other scenes are, I don't know if I could have made it through as well as I did. The community that you had in the chat, the beautiful music that Leah pulled together, the meaningful sermons that Mike had, and the right-on stories that Aaron had for Time for All Ages. All of those helped me make it through the last year and a half. And all of those were because our staff continued working, and they worked their butts off to make it as close to being in person as possible. And by the way, I thank Glenn and Matt for the technology, and Diana for Zooming and all of that. We had such wonderful volunteers and staff to pull this all together, week after week. Week after figuring out, is it going to be another week? What are we going to do? So one of the ways we support our staff is to pay their salaries, which is the biggest item in our budget. About 75% or more of our budget is staff. And we pay them well. Not as well as we might, but we are not on the bottom of what the UUA says is the salaries. But all of that comes from one thing: our generosity. Yep, whether it's by credit card, whether it's by ACH suck-out, whether it's by a check, or whether it's by stock. All of those things help this church continue being there. All this helps us to support each other. During this last year and a half, one of our beloved members went through the last stages of cancer and died. But he had support continuously from various members of this congregation. His family had support, people that hugged them, people that understood what was going on. And that does not happen when you meet somebody at a cafe. It happens because we're a community. We are a community of people who worship together and support each other. And the way we support each other in this setting is by making contributions to our church. So this is the time I'm reminding you to do it. This is also the time I'm going to tell you that we do not have 75 people in our congregation right now, in the sanctuary right now. So there's room for you to come on in and see half faces of those you knew. And you may have to ask them who the hell they are. Oops, sorry. Because they're all wearing masks. But anyway, please be generous. I know you can't do much here, but there is a basket out there. But we all have a credit card at home, so go to Breeze, make your contribution. Thank you very much.
It's okay, we'll do that. Okay.
Olam chesed yibaneh, Olam chesed yibaneh, Olam chesed yibaneh, Olam chesed yibaneh, Olam chesed Olam chesed yibaneh, chesed yibane. Olam chesed yibane. I will build this world from love. And you must build this world with love. And if we build this world from love, then God will build this world from love.
That was just lovely. A few joys and concerns of our larger community I want to hold up. Today, September 26th, the Reverend Betty Pingle celebrates her 96th birthday. Happy birthday, Reverend Betty Pingle. And if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, someone correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I do believe Reverend Betty is the living person with the longest running relationship with First Unitarian Church.
I think you're right.
I think I'm right. I may be wrong. Rose goes, there's a few others, but I think it's Betty. This morning we send healing thoughts and positive energy to Lisa Moore and John Reimers, both of whom had surgeries this past week. Both are now home and recovering. Thanks to the caring team, as always, for the cards and meals and rides and phone calls to our people and all of the care that they express. I want to let you know there will be a memorial service for Polly Langford, a longtime member of this community. That will be Saturday, October 9th at 2 p.m. This is going to be an outdoor gathering at the west end of Cook Park Community Center. This information will be in First Announced this coming week. Our prayer today is going to be Psalm 139, which is widely considered to be one of the most beautiful and most subtle of the Psalms. And I invite you to keep in mind that that all modern inclinations toward literalism or literal interpretation would have been completely foreign, would have made zero sense to the ancient Hebrews who sang and spoke these poems in their common worship. So I invite you, we should hear this in all the Psalms, not for their literal meaning, but for the spirit, the symbolism, the emotional truth behind the words. Psalm 139. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting up and my rising up and my sitting down. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path. You are acquainted with all my ways. There is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You have hedged me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light around me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you. For you formed my inmost parts, covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Amen. Yes. And I'm going to jump right in. A couple of weeks ago, the state's attorney here in Colorado initiated a grand jury investigation into the Aurora police officers and paramedics who killed Elijah McClain almost 2 years ago. You might remember that Elijah McClain was a young black man not charged with any crime who was detained by 3 Aurora police officers, held on the ground with hands restrained and knees on his back and neck for 15 minutes, long enough for Aurora paramedics to arrive and inject Elijah with enough ketamine to stop his heart. The Sunday following the indictment, a couple of weeks ago, I mentioned this in a prayer, praising the indictment for an obvious wrongdoing. I ended up drafting a letter for the Front Range Unitarian Universalist Faith Leaders Council for Racial Justice about that indictment. It was signed eventually by 26 Unitarian Universalist faith leaders, and it was sent to the press and the Aurora Police Department. The next day, I received a letter, actually an email, a beautiful email, from one of our own elder members here at First Unitarian Denver, someone I love and respect, who felt that I had not told the whole story. They had a relative who is a boots-on-the-ground firefighter and paramedic in Aurora. And the paramedics who had injected Elijah McClain were highly trained and highly respected colleagues. And the whole department was traumatized both by what happened and at now they having to face a grand jury investigation. I took that email and I removed the names and identifying information, and I shared part of that email from one of our beautiful elders. I shared it with my own colleagues who had signed that letter, and several of them responded with gratitude at having been shown another side to the story. One of them said, "There is nothing easy about racial justice work." Which is maybe a long-form way of getting to that punchline, but it's where I feel we have to begin. There's nothing easy about racial justice work, and as some of my black activist friends often remind me, if it's easy, you're doing it wrong. You're not getting to the heart of it. Yes. And here at First Unitarian, you're probably aware, we are beginning a conversation, a project really, to consider our role as a mostly white community of faith in the subject of material reparations for 400 years of brutal oppression of black people in North America. What can actually be done to restore right relationship after wounds that deep? By any measure, a difficult, complex, emotionally charged subject that I'm going to speak to in some detail next week. This week, I want to talk about how I hope we will engage that conversation. I want to speak about conflict and the covenant we have with each other, the ways conflict gets expressed and responded to, because conflict is hard, and it's especially hard in a beloved community where we aspire to honor the sacred worth and dignity of every person, every soul, even when we disagree, even when we passionately disagree, even when the stakes are high. So there's always a tension within organizations that value inclusivity. It's inevitable, where we want everyone to be heard and listened to, and we want everyone to feel heard and listened to, but we also want to make some progress. We want to see some results. I've seen this many times, probably you have too. At what point does the desire to hear and include every last point of view result in an organization paralyzed by its own internal process, unable to make a decision? Right? How long before good people start dropping out of the conversation from sheer demoralized exhaustion? Amen? You know what I'm talking about. And what about hierarchies and decision-making processes and formal policies? What about rank and position within organizations? And what does leadership look like? How do power dynamics play out in a beloved community conversation? What do we mean when we say consensus? What do we mean when we say democracy? How much of our attachment to hierarchies and results is really just a characteristic of white supremacy culture that excludes and disenfranchises people just by the very way we go about it? Just by the way we frame or define the issue. You get the idea. There's nothing easy about any of this. And that's okay. It's okay. Human conflict is fascinating and infuriating. I want to present two established models for thinking about and engaging with conflict, models that are applicable to all manner of human conflict: intimate, relational, familial, work, institutional, even national and international. The most widely taught model of conflict styles is called the Thomas-Kilmann conflict mode instrument, and it posits that there are 5 primary styles of conflict. These are collaborating, competing, avoiding, accommodating, and compromising. None of which are necessarily better or more effective than the others. It just depends on your goals, that is, what you're trying to achieve. It depends on your personality, depends on the context, the stakes, and much more. But see if you recognize yourself in any of these. Collaborators try to work with others to identify a solution that satisfies everybody. Collaboration is the opposite of avoiding. It seeks out the basic interests of each party, tries to hit both sides what they want. Collaboration is usually the best approach when the long-term relationships are as important or more important than the results. Kind of like in a covenanted community like ours. The competing style is for people who are willing to be assertive and uncooperative even at the other person's expense, pursuing their own concerns without concern for the relationship. In a classic sense, this is how businesses compete against one another. It's the outcome that matters, not the relationship at all. The competing style, not recommended for, marriages or long-term partnerships or beloved communities. Avoiding an ever-popular conflict style, especially in families, and in my observation, especially in white families. Avoiders tend to be both unassertive and uncooperative, sidestepping conflict or withdrawing from engagement entirely. Avoiding can be precisely the right strategy when it's safer to postpone a situation because you lack some piece of information or because the other party is more invested in the outcome than you are. On the downside, however, at least in my experience, avoiders have this little magical thinking way of sort of hoping that if they avoid this conflict long enough, it'll just go away. You know anybody like this? That's hardly ever true, that by that way, that conflicts just go away. In the accommodating style, people will self-sacrifice. Will just sort of give up, give over, acquiesce in order to please or satisfy the other person. This might be generous, but it could also be quite manipulative, and at least in my experience, often leads to mutual resentment in the long run. And lastly, compromising is being willing to give and take and negotiate in the interests of expediency. Compromising often aims for partial solutions, which is an excellent strategy when there's a timeline and a decision just has to be made. The downside of compromise is that too much compromise, you get a result that doesn't make anybody really happy. So long ago, I was leading a workshop on conflict for the parents of teenagers, adolescents, really. And we were doing this exercise on conflict. I had different conflict situations in different parts of the room. And people had to go to each part of the room and role play the conflict that was in that part of the room. For instance, a conflict between a person and an authority figure. That was one. Another one was between a parent and a child. One was between a person and a close friend who had betrayed some trust. Or another one was an internal conflict of competing priorities. You want two different things, you can't have both, kind of thing. And so on. One of the moms in this group, in this workshop, just happened to be a powerhouse of a human being. Her day job was being CEO of a large consortium of doctors. And she bulldozed her way through every single conflict situation all around this room, exhausting the other parents and participants who were taking part. And as we unpacked the exercise later, she was shocked to discover that she had competed in every single conflict situation, in every single role play, and never once varied from that conflict style. She ended up having a major epiphany about why her relationship with her son was so profoundly unhappy. I think knowing about these styles is useful. Useful in recognizing our own preferences, our own habits, and we've all got them, right? We've all got styles we kind of default to. That's okay. It's useful in recognizing what other people are trying to do and where they're coming from and what their habits and defaults are. And it's useful in being intentional about which style might be appropriate for us to use in a given situation. Most likely, we've all used all of them at one time or another. We've all been subject to someone else using them on us at one time or another. Wisdom and emotional intelligence lies in being able to choose the right one at the right time for the right reasons. The other system I want to share, and I got to say, this is my absolute favorite way of understanding and analyzing conflict. I learned it years ago. I've taught it many times in different contexts. And this is what's on the handout that you have, and it should be on the slide coming up right now. And wherever you are out there in the world, it should be showing up on your screen if you're watching on YouTube or Zoom or Facebook. In this model, there's 4 stages of conflict, from the simple to the intransigent, and I think it's brilliant in its simplicity. You can identify the stage of any conflict at all, by paying attention to 3 things. First, what's the focus? That is, what's the intention behind what's going on? Second is language. What are the words that are being used? And third, what's happening to information? Because information is crucial to any conflict. Right? So the first stage, the lowest level of conflict, whether the issue is simple or complex, the focus, that is the intention, is on solving the problem. The language used is specific, it's concrete, and it's owned by the person speaking. Information, freely shared, everything's on the table for everyone to see, clear as day. A very simple example might be, let's say you're sharing a room with someone. You want the window open for fresh air, but the other person just can't stand a draft. You discuss the issues, you examine the facts, you decide to switch beds so you can be by the partially open window and the other person can be on the other side of the room not feeling a draft. Stage one conflict, concrete language, focus on solving the problem. Information freely shared. Stage two, and we've all been there, the focus begins to shift from solving the problem to blaming the other side. Starts to get a little personal. The problem isn't necessarily the actual problem anymore. We start thinking the other problem is them. The language goes from specific and concrete to generalizations. Well, you always, you never, it's always been this way, and so on and so forth. The language goes from concrete to emotional. You start to hear expressions, or at least undertones, or body language, or intimations of anger and hurt, resentment, manipulation, and so on. Information is still shared, but now it's a little strategic. You might start leaving out some details, or when you share a detail, you might spin it a little bit to suit your own needs. And if any of that stuff is going on in your conflict, well, congratulations, you're at stage two. In stage three, the focus has clearly shifted now from solving the problem to winning. Both sides are now actively strategizing to win and seeking allies. The language is accusatory. It lumps issues together, and it assumes, at least in undertone, if not explicitly, it assumes bad intentions. Information is now highly guarded and very selectively shared because information is precious, and information at this stage is often weaponized. Unfortunately, the criminal justice system often operates exclusively in level 3, as do far too many school board meetings, city council meetings, and tragically, the United States Congress. Amen? Stage 3, start to finish. In level 4, the focus is beyond just winning. It is demolishing, destroying, or at least deeply punishing the other side. The language is ultimatums and absolutes. It's right or wrong, good or evil, matters of uncompromising principles. Information, like who cares, distorted, manipulated, or even created just out of whole cloth. I'm a little biased, but consider almost any speech or press conference by our former president. No issue was small enough that he didn't start out at or quickly move to the focus and language of a stage 4 conflict. Yes. And I'm sharing all this because I really hope we will engage the reparations project, what Patrick Horton is calling Operation Atonement. we'll start knowing right up front we have lots of different ways of thinking about this, different experiences, different priorities, belief systems, different things we need, want, or expect from our church and from our community. That's all okay. Our racial justice group has set up a series of forums, most of which are going to be on Zoom, a few of which are going to be in person. This is all outlined in the first announce you got a couple days ago. It'll be in all the next first announces for the next several months. The first forum is this afternoon, today at 1 o'clock. David Alley is going to facilitate a conversation on just what is reparations. So the link for that, again, is in your first announce that you got last Thursday. I believe it's on the church website. If it's not, it will be soon. So I certainly have my own hopes about where this conversation will go. And I will be utterly transparent about that. And I am personally way more interested and invested in a civil, constructive, creative opportunity for learning and sharing than I am in a particular outcome. And I hope you will be motivated by that as well. I'm laying out some of these thoughts about conflict because experience has shown here and out there in the world that white supremacy culture and critical race theory and reparations are intense and emotional subjects. Yes. And I trust us as a community to remember our covenant first. Our covenant, which leaves wide room for honest and principled disagreements, but no room at all for name-calling, blaming, ultimatums, or assuming bad intentions. It's the covenant that makes us who we are as a covenanted community. And I really do. I think we can have this conversation together over the next several months in a way that demonstrates who we are, that demonstrates our covenant, that models for other congregations who we are and how to have this congregation. And not only that, not only models who we are, but models what the world can be in dealing with difficult issues. See you next week. Amen.
Would you please join me in speaking our closing affirmation? Behind all our differences and beneath our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together throughout all time, through life and death, and the space between the stars. Over the last few weeks, I've been teaching you the ASL that I learned from Tanya Chittick in answering questions that I've gotten over these last 2 weeks. Yes, there's probably many ways to do these signs and to do the ASL, and this is the way that I've learned it, so I'm going to teach it to you. So, behind all our differences and beneath our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one. And the next line is, that binds us forever together. First, we're going to interlace our fingers, that binds us forever, and make a circle out from your heart. And then together. I think this is forever. Binds us forever together. Kind of do a hang loose sign. So we go around and then forward. Great. Join me in whatever you feel comfortable with. Make mistakes, learn, and it will come. Please refrain from singing. Thank you.
Our benediction today was written by my colleague, Reverend Lynn Unger. It's called Born Again. Let's be clear about this. It isn't the same as getting sick and getting better. It isn't changing your mind at the last minute or pushing away from the brink. The only way to be born again is to die. The phoenix doesn't just go up in a blaze of glory. It feels the fire, lick up and sizzle every feather, till each quill becomes a column of flame carried straight to the core. Whatever the legend of rebirth, there's always time in the fire, under the ground, hanging on the cross or the tree. Don't skip over that part of the story. If you would be reborn, you have to die. But what then? After the dying, how are we to rise again into new life? The earth, the hero, the God, you and I. How does any of us find our way back from the valley of the shadow? The same way we die. Walk into the light. Walk into the light. Walk into the light. Amen.
Amen.